Hi everybody! Today we have another fairy tale story from Dean's Gift Book of Fairy Tales. Dean's Gift Book of Fairy Tales. The book contains stories of Cinderella, Babes in the Wood, Sleeping Beauty, Puss in the Boots, Tom Thumb, Hansel and Gretel, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast. Illustrated by Janet and Anne Graham Johnstone. Dean and Sons Limited. Copyright 1967.
Hi everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Myself and Monkey Boo. Hello. Hello, Boo. Thank you for joining us, my friends. You'd like to say hello to your friends? Hi, Olive. Hi, Undine. Hi, Robin. Hi, everybody. Hi. Hi. Monkey Boo, what story have you chosen for us today to read? You've got the book open too. Oh yes, let's see. Babes in the Wood. I think that will be a wonderful story. Let's go ahead. Okay, let's go ahead. Join us.
Babes in the Wood. Once upon a time, there were two little children who had lost their parents. They lived in a big house with their uncle. Now the uncle knew that when these two babes grew up, they would be very rich. If only I could get rid of them, that money would be mine, thought the wicked man. One day he sent for two robbers and told them to take the children away and kill them. To do this, he paid the men a lot of money. The robbers found the two children playing in the garden. They lifted one onto each of their horses. "Are we going for a ride? How lovely!" cried the little boy, whose name was Thomas. "Hold tight, Jane," he laughed to his sister. Jane and Thomas thought the robbers looked very gay with their colorful clothes and feathered hats. Now one of the robbers was a kind man. Though he was a thief, he persuaded the other robber not to kill the babes, but to leave them in the woods. "We'll just steal their uncle's money and leave it at that," said the robber. "I'm not a man to harm innocent babes." The other agreed, and lifting the children down, they galloped off and left them in the wood. At first, Thomas and Jane were rather disappointed that their ride was over. However, they had been quite far and soon settled to eat blackberries, which they shared with the birds. They played hide and seek, and Thomas climbed the trees. When they were tired, they decided they had better go home. "I hope I can remember the way back," said Thomas. They wandered about for some time. First down one little path, then another. After a bit, Jane became frightened. "We're lost, Thomas," she said. "Don't cry, Jane," said Thomas bravely. "I don't mind if I sleep in the woods. Hold my hand tight. I won't leave you." Jane felt better. Holding tightly to her brother's hand, she followed him through the trees where the birds were singing their beautiful evening song. These little birds watched the children as they wandered through the woods. Someone else watched them too. the tiny wood bramble fairies who lived in those parts. These fairies were sometimes mischievous, often merry and gay, and always kind. Like little gypsies, they strolled from place to place and saw everything that was going on. "I haven't seen these children here before," said one. "I think they're lost," said another. "We have to look after them," said the fairies, agreed the fairies. "Shall I tickle their noses and make them laugh?" asked a merry fairy fellow who was swinging on a bramble. So the fairies flew ahead. "No, you fairy fool," said the others. "They are tired. We must find them a bed." So the fairies flew ahead until they came to a big tree whose great roots were covered in soft moss. They moved any stones and brushed up the moss, and just as they had finished, they heard the children coming. Quickly, the bramble fairies, who were very shy, flew away. "Look, Jane," said Thomas. "Let us lie down under that tree. I'm too tired to walk any more." "Look, Jane," said Thomas. Jane was even more tired than Thomas and getting very sleepy. "Yes," murmured Jane. She sat down and curled up against the mossy roots. "Good night, Thomas." Her head nodded drowsily. Thomas lay down beside Jane, and they snuggled into each other's arms. It was not too cold, and their bed in the woods were quite cozy and comfortable. As soon as the children's eyes were closed, some little birds flew down from the trees. "It will be colder soon," said a robin. "We must cover these children up." The other birds who had flown down chirped in agreement. Off flew the birds, and soon each returned with a big autumn leaf, which they laid on the children. More and more birds joined them. It was not long before Jane and Thomas were warm, tucked up in a beautiful coverlet of red, gold, and green leaves. How pretty it looked, like the most lovely patchwork quilt in the world. Two fairies who had lived in the roots of the tree came out to see what the birds were doing. "Poor little children," they said. "Who will look after them when they wake up?" And one fairy flew away to tell the fairy queen. When the fairy queen heard about the poor babes all alone in the wood, she came straight to where they slept. With a wave of her hand, she gave them the most beautiful dreams, and they smiled happily in their sleep. When they woke up, at first peep of dawn, the fairy queen was at their side. Taking Thomas by the hand and carrying little Jane, she took them to visit her fairy palace. Here they saw all kinds of wonders. They ate at a fairy banquet and watched a fairy ball. After 2 days at the fairy palace, the queen took them back from fairyland. She took them to a lovely house where lived a kind young knight called Sir James and his pretty wife. These good people were very sad because they had no children of their own. The fairy queen sent the lady a lovely dream that she would find 2 little children in her garden. These children would be hers forever. Thomas wandering amongst the roses, happily smelling the flowers. The lady kissed the children, then took them in and gave them breakfast. She and her husband tried to find where the children came from. However, the children's uncle had completely disappeared. The Fairy Queen, angry at his wickedness, had turned him into a big stone as hard as his heart. As for the robbers, the kind one came back to look for the babes. When he could not find them, he felt very guilty. He was afraid something dreadful must have happened to them. "I'll never steal again," he said, and he meant it. So he took a job as a gamekeeper. He and his wife lived a little cottage near the woods. The knight he worked for was the very same Sir James who had adopted Thomas and Jane. When the kind robber saw the children riding out on their little ponies with Sir James, his joy and relief knew no bounds. After that, he worked harder than ever, and even taught Thomas a lot about wild animals and birds. As for the other robber, he got knocked on the head by a constable when he was stealing, and serve him right. Sir James looked after the children's fortune for them, and kept it until they were grown up. So Jane and Thomas lived very happily in their new homes with Sir James and his lady. Their garden was always full of birds who sang and built their nests there. But though the children tried very hard, they never saw anything more of the fairies. What a wonderful little story of how little children were helped out by fairies and little birds and kind-hearted people. And wonderful pictures as well. Look at the two babes. There's Jane being hugged by her brother at the roots of the tree, and as they slept, the little birds covered them with all different colors of leaves. And then look at this drawing of Jane and Thomas lost in the woods. And see the fairy people watching them. There's one, two there, and another right up there. Now look, the robbers taking Thomas away on his horse, and then the other robbers taking Jane away on his horse. Look at their wonderful costumes, their feathered hats. Look at the horses. Wow, so pretty. So pretty. I love the drawings in this story.
Hey, how did you do that, Monkey Boo? Well, thank you very much, Monkey Boo, for joining us for today's reading of Babes in the Wood. It was a wonderful little story with nice and beautiful pictures. You'd love to say goodbye? Well, say goodbye, my friends. Say goodbye to your friends. Bye, Olive. Bye, Undine. Bye, Robin. Bye, everybody. Goodbye. Goodbye from me and Monkey Boo. Thank you. Bye.